My name is Ariba Aleem, and I'm a student of International Affairs and History at the University of Bonn in Germany. So, today I'll speak on a topic of universal acceptance, a topic that I'm passionate about. It's about linguistic inclusion and digital accessibility, or UA in Europe. So, this topic is not from a purely technical perspective, as some of my friends have already captured the details of it in previous presentation yesterday. However, I will try to argue that Europe's biggest challenge is no longer the standards, but the real challenge on ground is of adoption, coordination, and governance. So, by the end of this presentation, I intend to show why Europe is unusually well positioned to lead a multilingual internet agenda and what are the steps that can be implemented to make that happen. So, let's just revise on the basic question of what is a universal acceptance. So, the principle is very simple. Every valid domain name and email address should work everywhere, regardless of language, script, or length. Now, that means three things. First, internationalized domain names such as in Arabic, Chinese, or Greek names should be accepted by websites and applications. Second, internationalized email addresses should be accepted by forms, identity systems, and mail services. And lastly, new and long TLDs should be treated as normal inputs, not edge cases. So one might ask the question, why is this urgent? We now have about 1200 plus active GTLDs, and most systems still reject many of them. 60 plus delegated ID and country code TLDs cover 37 languages, and English only represents about 57% of online content, and that data is also declining. UA is no longer a niche compatibility issue. It is a prerequisite for a multilingual and equal internet. Since we are in Europe, we need to discuss why UA matters specifically for Europe. Europe has 24 official EU languages and a dozen of regional and minority languages. For Europe, UA is not just a technical cleanup project, it touches digital sovereignty, cross border public services, minority language inclusion, and the digital decade's language equality ambitions. If a citizen's valid address fails in a government form or an online service because it contains a diacritic or a non Latin script, the internet is functionally less available to that user than to others. So, the core problem that is underlined is the adoption gap and not the technology gap. Because the standards already exist, internationalized domain names exist, internationalized email addresses exist. You can see the graph where email address internationalization ready or EAI email servers has seen some progress over the last years. Yet many systems still reject valid inputs. And why does this happen? First, organizations continue to rely on outdated validation rules. Secondly, many users never encounter the problem themselves, so it receives very little attention. Third, development teams often prioritize other projects. And finally, the people affected rarely report the issue, they simply leave. As a result, the exclusion remains largely invisible. So, this is where I request the audience to look at UA through the lens of change management. You will notice that there is a clear pattern that emerges. Most organizations are somewhere between awareness and urgency. Many decision makers have heard of UA, but it is not viewed as a pressing or an urgent issue. Developer training remains limited. Implementation efforts are fragmented, and there is little coordination across sectors. In other words, the challenge is not knowing what needs to be done. The challenge is creating the momentum necessary to make that happen. What is missing is a coordinated mandate and a roadmap that turns UA from an optional best practice into mainstream requirement. The stakeholder map. Who needs to act? In my view, no single stakeholder can solve this challenge alone. Governments and regulators can provide policy direction and procurement requirements. The private sector can modernize systems and adopt UA ready practices. Academia and civil society can raise awareness campaigns and build skills among future developers. Meanwhile, registries, registrars, and infrastructure providers play a critical role in ensuring operational readiness. As per my study, the progress depends on all of these groups moving together hand in hand rather than acting independently. The Now, the Accessibility Act offers a useful analogy. It scaled digital inclusion through five mechanisms: a clear obligation, a broad sectoral scope, a market driven access incentive, standards based implementation, and a transition timeline. Universal acceptance can take an inspiration from this and incorporate it in its adoption. The lesson here is not that the UA should completely copy Accessibility Act policy exactly. Rather, it shows that Europe already knows how to drive large scale digital change when inclusion becomes a policy priority. So let's see what the data tells us about Europe's UA opportunity. Europe already has a very high IDN infrastructure support, with roughly 88% of European CCTLD supporting IDNs. Yet, IDNs remain only about 1.2% of global domain registrations. And one cited 2024 e commerce study found IDN email acceptance rates around 39%. Registries themselves also report low public awareness. To summarize in one sentence, the supply side is largely ready, but the demand side and the system readiness are not. So, this is where a methodology of change management becomes useful. Using Kotter's framework, we can think about UA adoption as a structured transformation process. Step by step, we can see how first creating urgency with a European UA readiness index is essential. Secondly, build a coalition across the Commission, ICANN, EURID, national NICs, and civil society. Third, define a clear vision, UA ready public services by 2030. Then, communicating, removing barriers through procurement and training, and generating early wins with pilot portals, sustaining momentum through annual reporting and funding, and finally, anchoring UA into standards, skills, and procurement culture. From technical issue to a strategic inclusion strategy, the message is quite simple. Universal acceptance should not be viewed solely as a technical matter. It is a digital inclusion strategy. It is an enabler of a multilingual internet. And it is a governance challenge that requires coordination across different sectors. And lastly, it is also an opportunity. Organizations that become UA ready will be better positioned to serve increasingly diverse online communities. Europe demonstrated through the GDR that it can set global digital standards. With this thought, I leave you. The technology is ready. The question is, are we ready to make the internet work for everyone? So, thank you.
Thank you, Ariba. Questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. This is Xian Hong from UNESCO. I'd like to really congratulate this excellent research. Actually, as you may have seen on the first day and yesterday, UNESCO and ICANN has jointly launched a policy brief on advancing universal acceptance worldwide. I mean, what you have done exactly sounds music to us because that's what we expect to see happening in all continents. So I really is extending an invitation to collaborate. I totally on board on that ecosystem-wide strategy, inclusion, multi-stakeholder implementation, collaboration at all levels, not only at national, but also at regional and also international level. UNESCO has been fully on board to this. I like that we can continue this collaboration. It's a very important start to translate our strategy into action. Particularly, I like to be informed, to be up on the 5 pilot countries in European region, because we've been discussing about piloting some member state countries to have the UA adoption in the forthcoming months and years to give example for all the other countries. Let's hope that the UA will be eventually mainstreamed to other countries. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. I also attended the session yesterday, and it was a very insightful session on universal acceptance and giving insights on how there is still the profound value of UA in education, multilingualism, and economic growth, and can create opportunities for everyone. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions in the room? There's one online, Sirnish.
There is actually a question. Is there a link to where the policy brief on advancing UA worldwide can be accessed? So maybe the person missed it. So if there is a link, just let me know. I will put in the chat.
Yes, we do. I will send you the link. And this policy brief is currently open source publication on UNESCO website. You can simply Google UNESCO ICANN policy brief advancing universal acceptance. It's open source. It's up to everybody. You can translate to your local language using for your network. We are also being translated to French and all the other UN official languages, plus Portuguese, plus Swahili, plus also some indigenous languages, including Quechua. So I do hope that itself is a multilingual act to join force on that. And also I also put it on my LinkedIn and also other social media accounts. Thank you again for your attention.